Hello, everyone. Great to see you. We are in our live with CCO and at episode 93, getting very close to 100. When we do our live with CCO, it is much more casual and we hope that it's engaging for you. So feel free to post questions along the way. I'm keeping an eye, and so is Jesus in the background. The question that we were going to cover came in from one of our CCO club members. And of course, if you're a CCO club member, you always get preferential treatment. We look at those questions that come in first to answer. And this was a really good one. Medical coding for cesarean or C-section delivery. I know that it is confusing when we start looking at obstetrical coding, a lot of extra codes that we're not used to putting in there. Hi, Carmen. I see from New York, and Cindy. Uh, but medical coding for cesarean section is actually really easy. And so I'm going to take you through the codes. And in addition, I went in and looked at CPT Assistant and found some scenarios that obviously were confusing for some people enough that they submitted it and gave answers. And we're going to walk through that as well. Now, I did note on CPT Assistant the month and year that the questions had come in. If you have CPT Assistant available to you, then you can go in and look at those archives and find those questions. Or maybe you have it in your encoder. I have it with Find a Code. So whenever I look up a code, I can go down and see if CPT Assistant has any comments on there. Check and see if your encoder does that. It is an additional fee usually, just like okay, CPT Assistant would go with the CPT codes, and then there is also available with your ICD-10 codes. You can get Coding Clinic. And if you're not familiar with that, what it means is that these are the experts that give an opinion that is recognized for everybody as experts. So when they tell us to do something, then we can feel confident that it's accurate. A lot of questions get put to both of them, and then the experts sit down kind of in a round table, hash it out, figure out how to write it to where everybody will understand properly, and then it's submitted as an official not finding, I don't know what you actually call it, official statement of this is the way that we will be you'll use this code, or this is the policy when this scenario comes up. Well, I can tell you we're not going to get really in depth into obstetrical coding this time, because that is something more intense. We're going to focus down on C-sections specifically. And I want to alleviate the fear that surrounds C-section delivery coding. Again, there's just a few codes that you have to use with this. And I think if you learn those codes, it's pretty straightforward. So let's alleviate some of that fear. The first thing we need to be fully aware of is that there are different sections or components of care for the patient when they're an OB patient. But routine care is going to include the antepartum care, meaning before the delivery, when the mama finds out that she's pregnant, and she will go initially usually to established care, and then show that she's pregnant. They'll run a test, and that'll, if you have insurance, they'll be able to submit it to the insurance company saying, okay, we're starting antepartum care, as well as postpartum care. Now that's after the delivery. Now, with a C-section, usually the antepartum and the postpartum and the delivery is all bundled into a package. The same thing with vaginal births. And then there's vaginal to C-section, and there's also C-sections that had happened in the past, and then you're going to attempt a vaginal birth. All of those have different ways in the coding to signify that that's what's going on. Remember, we are coding for statistical purposes. It happens to be a convenient way to get paid. We want to know statistically how many C-sections are being done, and we want to know how many vaginal births. We also want to know how many vaginal start out as vaginal and then convert to a C-section for a various amount of reasons. And we can even with our codes determine what is happening, why it converted to a C-section, or women have had a C-section and they're going to attempt a vaginal birth. That's all statistics that we want to capture, and it's our job to translate that through the documentation. It's very important that we get it right because of that. So, with these codes, the main code for a C-section is going to include the antepartum and the postpartum care, as well as the delivery. Now, what does that entail? It's going to be a routine prenatal visit. So you go in, you establish care, and then they say, well, you don't have to come back for another month or so. So that you don't have to go very often that first trimester. And then when you get into the second trimester, you're coming in more often, maybe every 2 weeks. And then in the last trimester, it gets to where you're coming in weekly, and then uh, um, more frequently if necessary. And during that time, the obstetrician is taking care of the mother and the baby at the same time. If there's a complication with the baby, that's noted. Everything stays in the mama's chart until the baby's born, and then the baby gets their own chart. And then you'll start dropping P codes instead of those codes for the mama. All right. Now, let's look here. It also states, and mind you, I'm going to convert over here to my other my other screen because it's much bigger. I did get glasses for my computer so that I could see better, but I just got them and they're making my ear sore. So excuse me while we go over these. Uh, Now, let's backtrack real quick. So you have the initial maternal history and evaluation, the health status of the mother and the baby, right? They're taking care of the baby, and it's kind of a package deal. And then the visits for the first 28 weeks of gestation, and then biweekly visits and to 36 weeks, and then weekly visits thereafter. So if you've ever had a baby, that is absolutely the standard unless there's complications involved. When you have a cesarean delivery and it's planned cesarean delivery, then prior to the mama going into labor, they're going to schedule the C-section. And hope again, in a lot of ways, they want to catch before the mama goes into labor because they don't want the baby getting down into the birth canal necessarily. And so they will continue to monitor, set the date, usually right there around the due date. And again, depending, there's so many protocols involved, especially if you're dealing with twins, how many weeks you go, and so on and so forth. And we've done videos on that. You can go back into our YouTube channel, or if you're in the club, go back and look at some of the other obstetric videos that we have done. So that code takes care of prenatal, antepartum, and delivery and postpartum care after the delivery of the baby. Well, what actually happens when we have a C-section? Here's just a quick review if you've not had one, or uh, actually, you can go and watch these on YouTube. There's a lot of medical channels now where you can watch those, or go to OR Live and see C-sections. And I'd encourage you to do that if you've not done that before. It's not exactly what you think it is. So the first thing they do is and this is all included in the package, you're going to have an epidural. or whatever anesthesia they choose to give the mother. Sometimes they have to put them completely out for various reasons. They go ahead and they make the incision in the abdomen. There's more than one way that they would do it, and that is a conversation that the provider has with the mother. And it also matters if you've had multiple C-sections before, what they choose to do, so they can go horizontally or vertically. The uterus is then an incision is made into the uterus itself. They suck out the amniotic fluid, because normally, like, the water would break and that would come out, but so they need to remove the fluid, and then they kind of grab a hold of the baby's head, kind of scoop them out, and lift the baby out. After they want, uh, it's right there in the pelvis, setting in the pelvic cavity. And then the physician is going to disengage the baby's head from the pelvis. So again, usually the baby's pointed down and going into the pelvis, ready for birth. Now, there may be a reason why they've chosen a C-section, because maybe it's breech or there's other complications involved, and the baby's head isn't in the position to where it would come to the pelvis. It might be baby's bottom or the baby's legs. Uh, but as soon as they do that, as soon as they pull the baby out, then they're attending to the baby, suctioning the airway, and so on and so forth. Once the baby's completely removed, then they'll take care of the umbilical cord, make sure there's no entanglements, it's not wrapped around the baby's neck or anything. They'll a lot of times the baby on the mama's chest, but there's usually a drape there to where the mother can't see what's going on. And then, but they'll put the baby up kind of high on the chest or up next to the baby. Sometimes they'll give the baby to the daddy, but they'll prep the baby, get the baby all wrapped up and cuddled up, and then they will take out the placenta. After they've taken out the placenta, and they'll start stitching everything back up. They start with the uterus and they just go backwards from the way they came in. uh, the one thing that some people don't realize once they read these, um, uh, the op report for these, how many layers you're working through when they're repairing the incision that they made. So again, you're cut in layers, and then the repair, the closure is done in layers. Uh, Once the baby is delivered and the mother is taken care of, then they wheel them into their room again. And all of that follow up care after the cesarean, and there's several things that they have to do, uh, is all included in the bundled package for that cesarean delivery. So let's talk about the common codes that are used. The code for a cesarean delivery that is routine with the antepartum and the postpartum included, all bundled in, is 59510. So again, it's one code. You don't have to worry about anything else. However, keep in mind, if this is the code that's used, that means that provider has done the antepartum, cesarean delivery, and the postpartum care. Now, there is many a scenario when that's not applicable, when that's not actually what happened. And in those cases, there's other codes available. So the next code that you would use is 59514 when you have only the cesarean. So if there is a different surgeon that does the cesarean section and didn't do the antepartum, doesn't plan to do the postpartum care, then you would code 59514. I know that in our advanced class that we just launched, there was a scenario like this, a case that we went through and coded out recently, and that was exactly the scenario. The mother was at one hospital, had the C-section, and was that person was not that provider was not doing anything else, and then they were going to attend their regular provider for all of the postpartum care, and that provider had done all their antepartum care. So not only statistically do we want to know this, but this does change the payment and the reimbursement because less work was done. Uh, if they do the cesarean delivery and the postpartum care, then they would code 59515. And that might be where maybe the mother had no antepartum care and shows up, has at the hospital in an emergency setting. They do a cesarean section, and then she's follow up, and the postpartum care is used with that baby. So Cindy's asking, would you use modifier 54 with 5514? No, I don't believe so, but let me just bring that up over here on my encoder so I can walk you through that. I know what your thought process is. I can just bring that in the screen here. Let me get it to come up. Uh, while I'm looking at that, and Cindy, that's a good question. Oops, hold on. It didn't want to do that. While it's trying to come up, because I had it up, let me go ahead and go to the next section because it's saying that find a code isn't coming up. Uh, let's go ahead and look at this particular scenario that came in the CPT assistant. There it goes, surgical care only. And what they're saying with the surgical care only is that you um, it's routine and standard, but they're only doing the surgical care, but that's already what the code is saying. So you don't need to use that modifier with her, but that's a good question. All right, going into CPT assistant, and I can show that to you. If I show that to you, it's going to downsize the screen. So Cindy, let me show that to you when we get to the end so that I can downsize the screen, and we'll walk through some of those scenarios and options where maybe modifier 54 could be applicable. CPT assistant said in February of 22, they had a Q&A session. Again, people send in questions, and then all the questions that got picked, they go ahead and write answers to. So this particular was a question that went under surgery, maternity care, and delivery, and it's that private OBGYN group provides the antenatal and delivery services and intends to provide the outpatient postpartum checks, which is part of the global obstetric package deal, right? It's all bundled. However, the hospital OBGYN, same specialty, different tax ID number, that's pertinent, meaning they're not under the same group, provides the postpartum checks while the patient remains inpatient status prior to discharge. May the hospital OBGYN report a separate E&M service for the postpartum care? Now, this probably happens quite a bit for a lot of different reasons. And if you've seen this happen or you can think up scenarios, feel free to put those in the chat as well. So what do they say? Now, I had to make this a smaller font. I hope that you can read this okay to be able to see this. But since this will stay up, you'll be able to go in and look at this and maybe make it bigger on your screen. Well, what CPT assistant stated was for inpatient postpartum care, when it's included a component of a global obstetric code like 59400, routine obstetric care, including antepartum care, vaginal delivery with or without episiotomy or forceps. That's all. This is just the description of the code and postpartum care. And 59510, which is routine obstetric care, pretty much the same thing. However, there are several considerations when determining whether inpatient postpartum visits may be reported separately when performed by another physician. And these are the questions that you have to ask and get an answer to. Okay, the first one. Is the private OBGYN group also provide inpatient postpartum checks? So are they both doing it at the same time, or were they not able to do it, and so this inpatient provider comes in and does it? If so, the checks are included in the global obstetric package, and the hospital OBGYN cannot report the services. because it's already being done, in other words. Or has the private OBGYN group reporting the global package arranged with the hospital OB group in advance to provide coverage for this service, including remuneration. So if that happens, then the hospital doc should not bill the services separately, meaning they've worked out a deal because this happens often, and they will be reimbursed by the private group. And so they aren't going to bill the insurance company. Another scenario would be, has the private group arranged with a hospital group to provide inpatient postpartum checks? If not, and if the private OBGYN group is also unable to perform the inpatient checks, the hospital group can do the uh, report and the subsequent care codes for the inpatient postpartum checks, not when they leave the hospital. The private group may need to append the modifier 52, not 54, like Cindy was mentioning, because that's a different code. Because that's reduced services, meaning, hey, this is what it bundles out, but we're not doing that, so we're reducing the services. And then the global package would therefore indicate that not all components in the global package were performed. Now, the last thing to ask is the hospital group performing the service as part of the facility quality measures and addition to care for the private group? Because quality measures are different. And quality measures are metrics that the hospital's maintaining, and they want to check on different specific scenarios, like how many C-sections are being done at their facility, or how many complications resulted in a C-section, or how many complications uh, were resulted after, like infections and so on. That's different. That's not reimbursed either, because the hospital is being reimbursed for that for their metric system. Okay, so I know that gets kind of confusing. Ultimately, you just have to think to yourself, who who gets the reimbursement? And is it going to be the private group? If they're going to get the reimbursement and they make a deal with a hospital group, then the hospital group doesn't bill. If there is no agreement and the private group is not doing it and the hospital group does it, then they both get to bill it out. Kind of think of it that way. All right, there was another question. This was an additional note that came up. So this was the same scenario, but this note that I thought was important to go ahead and put on there that said, oh, by the way, if they did a delivery only code, the 59409 for vaginal delivery, and a 59514 for cesarean delivery only, do not include antenatal or postpartum care. If a private OBGYN physician group performs the antenatal visits and the delivery, it would report the appropriate E&M code for outpatient care, because the private group would not be reporting global services, and the hospital group may report the appropriate E&M for the inpatient postpartum care. Okay. That again, if you take it really slow and you kind of compartmentalize everything, it makes sense. But I know that if you're used to doing outpatient or you're used to doing inpatient, it gets kind of convoluted, because these are bundled packages where the patient's going kind of back and forth between facility and clinic. All right. In March of 2013, there was another really good question that came through CPT Assistant that thought that we should talk about. I had a coughing fit the other day, guys, and I've kind of got like the hiccups or something going on. Not being that suave, am I? Okay, this question. When triplets are delivered by C-section, how should the services be coded if the antepartum and postpartum care is also provided? In other words, if we have twins or triplets, does that change anything? Should the C-section delivery code be reported more than once because you have multiple babies? And when you have multiple vaginal births, the coding's a little bit different when you do that. But there is a code for how many babies are being delivered. Well, the answer is if you have multiple babies being delivered by C section, the appropriate code that would be used, depending on those ones that we already looked at, 59510 through 59514, would be reported only once because only one delivery was performed. So the delivery, the C-section, isn't the doctor pulling the baby out of the abdomen, it's prepping the mother, uh, going into the abdomen, uh, taking the baby out, as well as all the closing up. You don't do that multiple times, right? So, again, that is like Cindy says, no, a C section is one incision, it's not multiple. So, think of it in the context of something else. If you um, opened somebody up because you had to take out their gallbladder, and when they're open, you look and the provider says, "Oh, wow, their appendix looks pretty gnarly. We're going to go ahead and take that too." Um, then you don't get paid extra for, or you don't get paid times two, I should say. So let's just make up a number. Let's say you get $10,000 for taking out the gallbladder. Well, you don't get $10,000 for taking out the appendix because you've already opened them up and you're only going to open them up once and close them once. That's the bulk of the work. While you're in there, you're going to take out two pieces of the anatomy. Well, whether it's complicated or not, it doesn't matter. The bulk of the reimbursement comes from the opening and the closing, I guess you could say. Now, there are other situations that can make it more complicated, and they go on to address that. They said, because again, we're only doing one delivery, but if the C section is significantly more difficult, which it could be with multiples, I would see why it would be, then modifier 22, increased procedural services could be used with the routine obstetric care, the antepartum, cesarean, and postpartum care. So that could happen. It very likely would happen. However, if you go using these modifiers, especially ones that state, hey, I did more work, you got to prove that it was more work. And therefore, that means you sending in additional documentation. So they address that. Next paragraph, they say to further clarify when reporting a code like 59510 with the 22 modifier, a copy of the op report needs to be submitted with a claim to the third party payer. In addition, the diagnosis code for multiple gestations should be indicated. Documentation must support the substantial additional work and the reason for the additional work, like examples of increased intensity, time, technical difficulty of the procedure, severity of the patient's condition, greater physical and mental effort required, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I do know that I learned this from someone that I had mentored with, and gosh, now I can't think. I think it was I'm trying to remember who it was now, but she had said that when things like this happen, whether outpatient or inpatient, when you have to submit that paperwork to show that it was more work, what you need to do is take that highlighter and underline all of the areas that showed that it was more work. Make it blatantly obvious. Don't just, be stapling that all together, which that's old school. You don't do all that, but let them see where the provider documented the additional work that's needed. And that'll increase the likelihood you won't have denials. Yeah. DJ says, overlaps, double dip concerns. Absolutely. We're always thinking about double dipping. And so if you have that on the forefront of your mind and you think, oh, wait a minute, is this double dipping? Sometimes, especially when we're new at this, we either go too exuberant in one avenue where we code too much, or we draw back too much. Oh, we can't do that. So somewhere that pendulum has to be in the middle, and they'll say, no, this isn't double dipping because ABC, but if it was XYZ, then it would be. And it comes with practice and mentoring and submitting claims that get rejected and them telling you why. Cindy goes on to say, it does help them spot what you want them to see if you highlight for sure. So obviously, Cindy has had to deal with this. Why why not make it as easy as possible for them? We always give the payer a hard time, and I know that our last May Mania that we had a couple weeks ago was a lot of fun at my chapter, but a couple of the members worked for payers, and so the running gag is they work for the dark side, right? And anyway, we have fun with that. All right, guys, this closes what I found regarding C-section and highlighting some of the areas that you may need to be aware of. I was able to get that modifier 54 to come up. Let me just bring that over now so because it won't mess up my screen. And note that surgical care only, modifier 54, when the physician or other qualified healthcare professional performs a surgical procedure and another provider's preoperative or postoperative management, surgical services may be identified by adding a modifier 54 to the usual procedure number. The takeaway here, though, that you need to be aware of is you use these modifiers when it's not included in the description. However, when you look at that particular code, it tells you that it's antepartum, delivery, postpartum, or um, delivery only, or delivery and postpartum. So it already spells it out. It would be redundant to go ahead and apply a modifier 54 in that scenario because, again, it already states it in the description. All right, we are ready for some questions. Claudia says, also, any advice on interviewing for coder's position? I have one next week via Zoom, but I am already nervous. Claudia, that is a great question. And we just talked about this in our Maymania chapter. We had a director of a orthopedic clinic system, and she came in and talked from an administrative uh, perspective on the interview process and what she looks for. So I can absolutely share with you some of the advice that they gave. One of the things that she said, Claudia, that was a good takeaway in my opinion was you may not be as qualified for the position as you think. I'm not saying that you're not credentialed and you're not ready to hit the ground running, but she said in her mind, if you have a willingness to learn and you're eager and excited about the position, that goes very far with her. And she goes not from an HR standpoint, but she's the one that will be ultimately making the decision. Now, if this is your first interview, again, it depends if it's the first or the second interview. So I would have a positive attitude. They said they really like to see your passion come through on coding and what you do for the industry or in the industry. Your again, I already mentioned eagerness to learn was something that they liked, and you researching the facility or the clinic system that you are going to be working for. So let's say your interview is for a Feel Good Clinic in Mayberry, USA, and you go in and look at their website, and you notice that they just added a new, they just got a new cardiology doctor. It might be a good thing to bring that up. So they're talking to you, they're asking you, you're going through the interview, and they said, "Do you have any questions?" And you say, I was looking at the website, and in my research, I noticed that you just got a new cardiology doctor. Are you guys, planning on expanding your services in the community or in this area?" And they'll think, "Oh, wow, you took the time to look into what was happening in the clinic system. That just brought you up a peg because you did that additional research." Another thing that, now, not necessarily on a first interview, Claudia, feel this out, but she said she appreciates it when someone asks if they can have the job. And you get through your interview, and it goes really, really well. And don't say, "Can I have the job?" Just say something to the effect of, I have been looking into, feel good clinics, and this this feels to me like a place I really want to work. And so I if the opportunity, if you decide to go with me, know that I'll be excited to be working with you. Or, just flat out say 'em, "Can I have this job?" Again, initial interviews or phone interviews, sometimes that's not where you go with that. And the last bit of advice that I thought was really, really telling, and several other people that were in a hiring position made a comment about this too. They said, after a few days, follow up, send an email, make a phone call, or whatever you need to do. Give them a few days. Now, nothing usually happens quickly, but if you make the effort to contact them, they said that really bumps you up. They said, surprisingly, a lot of people will not follow up. So, those are the takeaways that I would give you regarding your interview. Let them know you're nervous. Let them know if you've never done a virtual interview before, that's okay. Make sure you look professional, have a nice, don't have a t-shirt on, because that all comes through. Blur out the background if, you're going to have your dishes on the table or something like that. And make sure that your appearance is clean and neat and professional. And I always think lipstick works. All right. Let's see. Maria says, "I'm learning medical coding currently." Great. "Do you think that I should have some experience before taking the test?" Right. Um, I have some opinions about that. I don't think that you have to have real world experience before taking the CPC exam. However, you absolutely need to have experience taking the tests. So, what my suggestion to you would be is take as many practice exams as you can get your hands on. A lot of people offer them. We have 3 paid exams, we have free practice exams. You can go into our freebies section on the website, go to cco.us, go to freebies, and Jesus is putting those links up for you. We have a CPC practice exam. We have an ICD-10 practice exam. That would be applicable. And they're not so long that it's going to take you forever to get through them. Take advantage of them. And you need to be getting, 85% on these exams before you sit for the real exam. That is pretty ideal. So look for practice exams from companies that you trust. I know there's maybe some out there uh, that aren't vetted, so I can't speak to them, but I can tell you that we have excellent ones. We've often been told that ours are more difficult than the the actual exam, and we have fabulous rationales. In my opinion, a rationale is more important than the actual practice exam. And then the AAPC has practice exams too, and you would be able to trust them. Yep. Let's see. Jill says, how do you bill for postpartum care when maternal fetal medicine specialist bills antepartum visits individually and does not deliver the patient? I've had claims for PPV visits come back saying global charge. Oh, well, that's when you've got to get modifiers involved. And the best advice that I can give you, Jill, on this particular scenario is that you're going to have to call the payer. Uh, and I know that sounds dreadful, but uh, certain payers will have different policies on there, and there's got to be a conversation with the other entity to find out what they're doing and come to an understanding. If this is happening frequently, you're going to lose money. So in those, you need to call the payer, tell them the situation and say, what do I need to do to make sure that our claims are being reimbursed? And they'll give you a step-by-step process. There again, there may be some modifiers that are involved there for that. And the reason I tell you to go ahead and call is I could say, oh, we'll use this modifier or do this, but every payer gets to say what they want. And so I might not tell you what your payer wants. And especially when you start getting into state like Medicaids and things, they're really picky. So what they do in Missouri may not be what they do in Texas or wherever you're at. So again, I wish I had a simple answer for you, but that's going to be your best policy. PathLab Coder says, Claudia, make your last question during the interview. When do I start? That's it. That's a good one. It's how I've gotten every job I've ever interviewed for. They laugh and say, no one ever asks that. You'll get the job. That's exactly what they were saying in our May Mania. So thank you for mentioning that. I was trying to remember how they worded it and say, when do I start? So that shows that eagerness, that you're excited to work with them, and it's obviously worked for her. So, but uh, let them know you're excited and passionate about what you do. You'd be surprised how many people will take a chance on a new coder, uh, or even uh, not necessarily a lateral move. Maybe an extreme, but say you've done some outpatient coding, but this is an inpatient position, and you're willing to learn, and the PCS code set, and you're getting, saying, I want to sit for the CIC or the CCS, but I feel like I need a little more experience. I would love to have that opportunity to gain that experience with you because I really am excited about what I'm learning about PCS. And they're going to think, wow, okay, I'll give this person a chance and train them to the way I want. Nancy says, this is all a great info. I'm learning coding now. So thank you for this. And Nancy, know that you can ask us questions like this anytime you want. We want to be available for you. That's why the CCO Club is a great opportunity to be able to ask questions. And we do these Q&A lives all the time. Every week, we're doing one, usually on Thursdays. And you can also reach out to us via LinkedIn, and we're on Facebook and stuff. And now we just started TikTok. So jump out there and find us on TikTok if that is, something that you do. All right, guys, I really enjoyed talking to you. We'll do these Q&A sessions more often. Have your questions ready for us next time we come together. And if you have a topic that you'd like to know more about, feel free to submit it in our topic request. It's real easy to do. Go to cco.us/topic request. Explain what the question is, why you want to know, and we'll do exactly what we did tonight. We'll break those down and explain them, hopefully in a way that'll be easier for you to understand. Sometimes you just have to hear somebody explain it in a different format, even if you're already in classes. Sometimes, again, it helps to have a different point of view explain it. All right, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
need more medical certification and business training? Learn more at www.cco.us.